Hello, and welcome to Falmouth Road Race History with Paul Clerici and Bill Higgins. Over the next hour, we're going to take you through the history of this great race, through stories, anecdotes, some tall tales, and some great photos, some of which rarely seen, and there's a few in there that have not been seen before. I'm Paul Clerici, the author of the book, A History of the Falmouth Road Race, Running Cape Cod. And next to me here is Bill Higgins, the longtime Cape Cod Times sports writer and sports editor, who has written extensively about the race and still does. And both of us have run the race several times each, although not as fast as we used to. So we'll get right to it. In 1972, on September 10th, Tommy Leonard, right here, the gentleman in the middle of this photo from the Elliott Lounge with a white hat, was working at the Brothers Four in Falmouth Heights, which is no longer there. He was watching the 1972 Olympics out of Munich, and Frank Shorter, an American, was winning the marathon, which Tommy Leonard loved the marathon, loved the Boston Marathon himself, had run it several times when he worked at the Elliott Lounge in Boston, which is about a mile from the finish line. He always had a lot of Boston Marathon people, memorabilia. It was a runner's haven in the Elliott Hotel. So when he was bartending during the summer at the Brothers Four, which he did at Falmouth Heights, he basically stopped serving beer and gave commentary about the race. He was so excited Frank Shorter was winning. And then when he won the race, Frank Shorter, the first American to win the Olympic marathon since 1908, live on television, great coverage, 1972, Tommy said, wouldn't it be great to have Frank Shorter run here in Falmouth? And he said, everyone laughed at him, and he goes, when people start laughing at me, I keep that in my mind. So I like that as an idea. So this was 1972. Title IX just passed for federally funded between men and women sports. You had the running boom was just about to start. You had some road races coming up. You had some books about running coming up. So running was really starting to become something in 1972. So Tommy Leonard really had that in the back of his mind. So when John and Lucia Carroll, who were in Falmouth at the time, they just moved there in the 70s. John had the cross-country girls at Falmouth High School, and the girls weren't allowed to run in the women's divisions of races afterwards. So he created the Falmouth Track Club, which allowed him to do that. He learned that, Tommy Leonard had learned that, through the Carrolls and Rich and Kathy Sherman, Rich being the recreation department, that the girls needed some funding. So to help out with competing after the regular season ended. So what Tommy did is he said, let's do a race. Now, Bill, you weren't here until 75, but you remember all these stories of how that started, too.
Certainly, yeah. As you said, it was really a convergence of history and a lot of other things that just kind of all coalesced together with Frank winning in 72 and being an American, and I think the first American since 1908.
Yeah.
And we all at that time, I think, were trying to be a little bit more healthy and thinking about our fitness and so forth. And then Frank comes along and wins the marathon, and Tommy comes along and is inspired by that performance.
Yeah.
Runs into John. John says, yes, we could use some help with our girls' track club. Tommy wants to, do anything he can to help them.
Right.
They get together with Rich as the town recreation director, and lo and behold, a road race sprouts up in 1973.
Yeah, it didn't take long. I mean, a lot of people knew Frank Shorter from around here, too, because he would visit Falmouth a lot. He lives here now. So people knew Frank, the running community knew Frank, and they knew running, and they knew Tommy Leonard. Everyone loved Tommy. So when all that started to happen, you're right, so within a year, now we're into 1973, what Tommy used to do with Eddie Doyle in Boston, Eddie Doyle worked for the Bull and Finch, which became Cheers, everybody knows, in Boston. When they had to raise funds for something, I remember there was a patron of one of the bars who got in a motorcycle accident, needed some medical help. They would do a race between the Elliott and the Bull and Finch, which was like about a mile. And they would do races from bar to bar in Boston all the time to raise money. So Tommy had that idea. So he ran himself from Captain Kidd and Woods Hole to the Brothers Four, Falmouth Heights, which just happened to be about 7 miles. But he would run that on his own.
Sure.
So he thought, like a lot of road races began with the running boom.
A bar-to-bar race.
Yeah, bar to bar, and like the old Broadway thing in the movies, let's start a race.
Yeah, it really is, as I said, kind of just a victim of circumstance and the idea of summer on Cape Cod. You know, the kids are here and everybody wants to maybe, you know, have a workout and then maybe have a cold beer afterwards. So why not start at one bar and then finish at another bar, you know, earn a cold drink. And
it wasn't unusual.
And the idea of it going from the Captain Kidd in this eclectic little village of Woods Hole to Falmouth Heights, which is really kind of a beachside, you know, touristy community, it made sense. And it just, lo and behold, it was a 7-mile race or 7.1 mile race, they thought. And it was an awkward distance, but it made sense. Let's run along the beach, let's run past the lighthouse, and let's stop at the Brothers Four and, you know, relax and enjoy ourselves.
Well, no one thought distance. I remember talking to Tommy about that. He goes, he even had an idea of having a marathon, Falmouth Marathon, which was the name of this T-shirt that he created in 1973. One of his original ideas was to run, and it'd be great if we could do it one time, but I doubt it, from Falmouth to Hyannis via Route 28, which is about 23, 24 miles, and add a couple miles here and there. That was one of his original ideas, one of Tommy's great, he was an idea man, as he always said. I don't think we're ever going to do that. It's tough to drive.
Shutting down the roads in the summertime for
It's tough to drive that distance,
that would be a challenge.
But the my point is the distance was sort of irrelevant. You know, it was just going from one bar to the other. And John Carroll was telling me, prior to 2003, when it was officially certified by USATF, it ranged from door to door was 6.999 miles from the door of Captain Kidd to the door of the Brothers Four. Depending on whose car was used to measure it, it went from 7 to 7.5. And the old-time runners will remember that the actual 7-mile mark was painted on the course.
That's right. That's right.
Because it would be either 7.1, 2, 3. So running logs back then, like when I ran it, I don't know what you did, I put like 7 miles plus. It was before Garmin's, before you could really measure your things. That's what I did, 7 point question mark. Because you didn't know. It was, again, whose car it was used.
Well, back in the day, and even when, you know, when road running really exploded and got popular, the distances became a 5K, you know, 3.1 or a 10K or 6.2, but 7 is just an awkward distance. You know, maybe you would run a 10-mile road race, or maybe you'd run a half marathon at 13.1. But I don't know that there are many 7-mile road races. Bix, I guess.
I think Bix is the only one I can remember.
7-mile race.
But you're right. So it didn't really matter. And Tommy said, "Well, this just happened to be I would run." It's a beautiful.
The course. The course is spectacular.
So you can blame Tommy if you're a 10K person who falters the last mile or whatever, right? Or if you're a 4-mile or 5-miler or thinking you can gut it out, maybe not going to happen as well. But the first shirt that we see here says Falmouth Marathon, and there's a couple of reasons for that, interestingly enough. One was just to take advantage of the word marathon, because Tommy Leonard loved marathon, and John was mentioning that too, John Carroll. But also back then, this is for old time and this may date some of us, back then a road race was considered in the 70s auto racing and motorcycle racing. They weren't, when you said a road race, they're foot races, really. But when you said a road race in the 70s, the Indy 500, things like that. So that was another reason sort of to clarify it, to use the word marathon. It also looked good, and Tommy did design the shirt, which was great. This is a photo of this. Is one of the original shirts.
It's a classic.
They've made replicas of this since then, but this was one of the originals that Tommy created. So as you say, he's an idea man. And backtracking here, this is a lot of the shirts that Rich and Kathy had made into a nice quilt. And it shows the different designs over the years, depending on the sponsor, with or without the sponsor. And a lot of people do this too. You know, you've in other races too, you make it into, you wear it for a number of years and you make it into a quilt. So it looks really nice when you see all these different images and stuff. This quilt is double-sided, and the only way to see their faces, I asked them to fold it for the photo. Otherwise, you wouldn't see their faces because it's huge. There's 2 of them.
You know, the other interesting thing that, you know, looking at that and thinking about Tommy being sort of the inspiration for the race, and John being the track coach of the girls team, obviously knew a lot about organizing, you know, events. And Rich, being the town's recreation director, obviously had a lot of expertise in organizational skills. And so the 3 of them, and with their wives, Lucia and Kathy, it just kind of perfectly meshed together.
It really did. It filled whatever gaps of organization. Again, this popped up nationwide. There were races, a ton of races started to come up at varying distances, little towns, big cities. Back in the mid-'70s, there were a lot of road races. And that's how it was. Some were very guerrilla-oriented, how you can create it, with without the support. You know, barricades and things like that. That's how races started back then.
And Tommy was, you know, as we remember and certainly know, that nobody ever said no to Tommy.
No.
When he knocked on the door and said, geez, can you donate something? Can you donate a prize? Can you help me out? Tommy didn't get no for an answer very often.
He said he was.
So he provided that kind of energy. And then with John and Lucia and Kathy and Rich, you know, he kind of lit the spark, and then they came in and kind of did the grunt work and the organizational work to make it happen.
Well, he knew his limitations, Tommy. He goes, I'm an idea. He always said, I'm an idea man.
Exactly.
I can get it started. I mean, like you said, for those prizes, the first number of years, he would have a little shopping cart on Main Street going in and out of places to get items. Debbie Ritchie, who's the first women's winner, in I think it was 73 or 4, the second year, 1974, she's got a hairdryer and a bouquet of roses. You know,
and I think Bill Rogers one year won a blender.
Won a blender. You know, things like Jenny Tuthill, who would want. So it all depended. And that was half the fun back then.
I think the first year, was it Dave Dubel won a trophy, and second place was a watch, and he didn't have a watch. He would have rather have had the watch than the trophy or something.
So I asked him, I said, do you have the trophy? He goes, no. If I had the watch, I probably would still
use it.
This is a later photo of the start. The first year had 92 runners, but this photo on the top left there, you see Captain Kidd before the banner. The Captain Kidd's where it started, with Bill Crowley's place, still there. Rich Sherman always jokes that and John Carroll goes, we were able to fit the entire race in the Captain Kidd because August 15th, 1973, which was Tommy Leonard's 40th birthday, on a Wednesday in the rain, we'll see this soon. So everyone wanted to stay dry, so they were inside the Captain Kidd. All 92 plus people were in there for the Captain Kidd. And it was amazing because between Bill Doherty too, at the Falmouth Heights was Brothers 4. I remember Bill saying John and Rich, Bill Doherty and Bill's brother Frank organized a lot of the finish line area. They used a clothesline for the finish line. And I guess it was that archaic back then. That's what races did.
Bill tells the story too, I think, that, you know, at the finish line at the top of the hill, which is, you know, where the Brothers 4 was, you know, they finish, they run across the clothesline, they go in, and I guess the post-race refreshments are like Schlitz beer and bologna sandwiches, and I don't know, the Gatorade was even around then, maybe some lemonade or something, but
I don't think Gatorade
there wasn't a lot of official stuff going on. You know,
Charlie Rogers took this. Yeah, this is great. Charlie Rogers, Bill's brother Charlie took a lot of great photos. This one he took. This is, for those of you not familiar with the area, this is the Brothers 4 at the top of Falmouth Heights. It's no longer there now. There's a pub and restaurant in there. Bill Doherty's place was in there. If you look in the bottom right corner with the red fire, talk about dated fire pole. That's where the finish line was for the first 2 years. And Dave Duba, who won, he was from Michigan, and the majority of the runners that first year were from Falmouth or Woods Hole or something. Dave Duba had an uncle who worked at Woods Hole, and he came. He was a cross-country runner at Central Michigan, and he came with a friend of his too, and on their way, once they got into the cave, picked up a hitchhiker who told them about this race. He goes, oh, I'll run this. So John, Carroll, and Rich, when they were at the starting line at the Captain Kidd, basically said, they told me this, they said, well, you all know where you're going. It's just the Surf Drive, the harbor, we'll meet you all at the Brothers 4. Well, you know, lo and behold, the leader's from Michigan. He doesn't know where he's going. But he did like this place, the Brothers 4, because he said this was great. You cross the finish line, and literally 6-8 feet, you take a left, you're in a bar.
That's right.
So this great old photo that Charlie took, this was a couple of years later, this isn't the first year, but the first 2 years in 73 and 74 was in the Brothers 4. And Dave Duba, who won it from Central Michigan, is shown here in the rain. As Pat Doherty is in second place in the back from Greater Boston Track Club. The Greater Boston Track Club, which comes in history we'll talk about later, actually started a day after the Falmouth Road Race, independently and separately in Boston at Boston College.
Right.
Jack McDonald, Coach Bill Squires, basically started the race at Roberts Center at Boston College the same week.
Yeah,
Not knowing later they'd be so intertwined, because the majority of the winners in the 70s and 80s of the Boston Marathon and Falmouth Road Race were Greater Boston Track Club guys.
Well, certainly Boston, with the marathon's history, dating back, to the late 1800s, was certainly a rich and vibrant part of the running community. And so Boston being, a base of a lot of, marathoners and world-class runners, it kind of just evolved. As you said, a lot of Greater Boston Track Club runners or Boston-based runners would come down to Falmouth, because Tommy was in Boston as a bartender.
He knew everybody.
And he knew everybody. Come down to Cape Cod in the summertime, we're going to have a road race.
Awesome.
And so he brought in a lot of really quality runners over the years.
Well, the first year didn't have any of the marquee runners. It was basically any first year race. Nothing against the Doherty brothers, who were really good. And there's a couple of number of good runners.
Sure.
Johnny Kelly, the elder, he ran it. So they were good runners. But I'm talking like marquee guys. One of the there's about 2 or 3 things, talking about a confluence of happenstance as we're talking, that Tommy and Leonard attributes to the success of the Falmouth Road Race. One was not having it on Wednesday for the second year.
Right.
He said because they sort of passed the hat around, so to speak, with a cigar box to collect money for the girls, which was the whole reason to have it that first year, and it worked. And since then, the fundraising and charities have been remarkable for this race.
Yeah.
That can be a whole nother program.
Absolutely.
To talk about the millions of dollars and the improvements of Falmouth and all different organizations. That can be another program. But that started, it's been there since the beginning, which is great philanthropic attitude for this race. This is 1974, this photo, and if you look in the bottom right corner, you'll just see a little bit of the finish line painted, and the Brothers Four is right there. This is 1974, great photo from the Falmouth Historical Society. So with 92 runners the first year, they were expecting maybe 100 or so for the second year. A couple hundred came out, several hundred came out for the second year.
That was a lot back then.
Word started to spread. 2 of the big reasons. One, Johnny Kelly was going to do it again. Everyone loved seeing him.
Sure.
Bill Rogers locally was going to do this. He didn't win Boston yet, but for local people, we knew who Bill Rogers was. Tommy Leonard asked Coach Squires, can you bring some of your horses down, use that word, from Greater Boston Track Club, which he did. That increased a lot of interest. And this gentleman here,
Marty LaCory.
Marty LaCory.
And I think, isn't it true that Marty's brother Steve was at Boston College, I believe? And I think there was a connection between the running community and Steve. And I think Marty was at a running camp maybe in upstate New York, and Steve reached out and said, hey, you can win this race, even though you're a miler and more of a short distance runner. Come on down. They'll take good care of you, and you can easily win this race. And they gave him #1, it looks like.
Well, he's an Olympian.
An Olympian, sure.
Was the 3rd high school American to run a sub 4-minute mile. Excellent runner.
World-class runner.
World-class runner. Really brought the attention. As you can see, the people, this is the second year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Absolutely.
But I remember talking to Bill Rogers, and Bill was saying, I'm not going to get beat by a miler.
Right.
He's a marathoner, a long-distance guy, and Bill obviously won this. And this is showing Marty LaCory coming in second. But it's a great photo to show it.
I remember talking to Marty once when I was writing a story when I was at the Cape Cod Times and reminiscing about the race. And, I'm not even sure he knew who Bill was, but he got out on the course, and it's like, well, who is this guy? I'm supposed to be able to, win this race easily. And, he was certainly in the thick of things. He finished second, and it was no disgrace. But, as you said, Bill was a, budding world-class distance runner, marathoner, and a big difference between running 7 miles and running a mile. And Marty reminisced about getting out along Surf Drive at 4 miles or so, and this guy was, hammering away, and he's thinking, holy mackerel, how am I going to handle this guy? And it turned out he couldn't handle him because Bill won the race.
I love that attitude by Bill. Yeah. This is also the year, if I remember, in 1974, and Courtney Bird remembers this as well, when Giles Threadgood, we all know from the area. Giles Threadgold wins the harbor style, like 3.5, 4 miles. I think Giles said, "This is really hot. I've had enough."
Right off Surf Drive.
Jumped into the harbor, cut across,
swim across,
and then swim across the harbor and jumped up again, avoiding the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Courtney and his wife were looking at it going, wait a second, where'd you come from?
That was Giles, I
yeah,
think.
that was Giles. Like,
Giles.
well, you know, that happens. So great attention with this. It's got a lot of good press in 1974 and everything. Now, in 1975, Tommy and Leonard's dream did come true when Frank Shorter ran. 1975 was big. They had a couple of years under their belt. This photo is from 1976, but it shows you the horses that showed up between Greater Boston Track Club, some of the elites. Now, Frank Shorter, who knew some of the runners around here, would always be in Europe around this time in August to run. So when he was contacted, he goes, I'd rather run here, but I get paid when I go to Europe. But he wanted to maintain his amateur status. This is between the 72 and 76 Olympic Games.
Sure.
So to work around this, Bill Crowley from the Captain Kidd, his widow was telling me that they paid him through the restaurant, not through the race. And I remember interviewing her for the book, and she said, we kept the canceled checks in case the IOC or the USOC would contact us or him, which I don't think they did. But when I interviewed her for decades later, she said she still had them. I said, I think Frank's in the clear. I think he's okay. She goes, I go, no, that's fine, keep them. But I think we're okay, we're beyond that. This photo that Charlie Rogers took from 1976 from left to right, almost a Hall of Fame class. The gentleman in the beard's Tom Didarian, great runner. You'd always see him in the Boston Marathon alongside the leading women. His pace was fast enough to be around there. He's the Greater Boston Track Club coach right now. Gentleman next to him is Frank Shorter with no bib number.
Right.
You know that, right?
Yeah. Wearing the McSorley's Ale t-shirt.
McSorley's Ale, the first sponsorship. Kind of got a few bucks for that.
Yeah.
The gentleman behind Frank in the white hat is Amy Burfoot in the beard, who won at Boston in 1968. Bob Hodge is right next to Frank Shorter, who'd won Mount Washington several times, top 5 guy, Boston a lot, and Falmouth. The Greater Boston guy there is Vin Fleming with a 0 on the bib. Next to him is Randy Thomas, another Greater Boston guy, great coach and administrator at Boston College. Great Bill Rogers is next to him. And who I forgot, because I'm going from left to right, back to the top left, the gentleman in the blue singlet behind Amy Burfoot in the white hat is Alberto Salazar.
Yeah, exactly.
1976, that's pretty good. But 1975, Frank finally got here.
Yeah.
And won a couple of years, which is kind of funny because Bill Rogers always said, you know, Tommy never thanked me. I lost a couple of races bringing Frank here.
Well, 75, I think, is when, certainly 73 is the beginning of the race and the beginning of this rich history. But 75, I think, is when the race really explodes onto a national, if not international, scene.
Right.
And road running in general is starting to sort of perk up. 3 years after Frank's marathon win, as I mentioned earlier, the country is getting into the fitness and running craze, and running has become a popular activity for the average people.
And they're becoming names. They're starting to know these guys,
exactly,
which is great.
And Bill, in 75, wins Boston in April and breaks Frank's American Marathon record. And shortly before that, he went to the World Cross Country Championships and won the bronze medal. Frank was only 20th, I think, in that race.
Right.
So Frank is sort of thinking, whoa, this guy Bill Rogers is pretty good. He breaks my marathon record in April, and as you mentioned, he had an opportunity to go to Europe and run track races, but he'd rather stay in the States. It was easier traveling. And oh, by the way, I can take this guy Bill Rogers on in Falmouth in a local road race. And so he comes to Falmouth in August of 75 with the incentive of, oh, Bill Rogers is, the local boy in Boston, but I'm going to come and, take him on again. And Frank beats him in 75.
Right.
And he beats the Boston Marathon champion, and then he beats him again in 76, which that photo showed.
And they trade off.
And,
a
great rivalry, and a great friendship, but a great, athletic rivalry is born, I think, in Falmouth in 75. And then they go to the Olympics in 76. Frank wins the silver medal again.
It just kept growing.
Bill comes back, I think, in 77 and 78 and wins again.
Yep.
Frank is in, I think, a couple of those races.
And Falmouth is becoming this
and
hotbed.
now, you know, Falmouth is literally off and running.
And the wheelchair athletes, too, with this photo, this is from 1977, but in 1975, Bob Hall from Belmont, who's the leader right in this photo, the wheelchair athlete, was in one of Bill Squires' classes. Bill Squires coached at Boston State College in UMass Boston. And Bob Hall was a great national wheelchair marathoner or miler champion. Asked Coach Squires, you know, I'd like to do Boston in 1975.
Remarkable.
There was no wheelchair category.
Right.
So Coach Squires ended up talking to the Boston Marathon. Bob Hall finished the Boston Marathon, became the first official entrant, first official finisher, basically started the wheelchair category that we know it is today. Same thing with Falmouth. He called Falmouth and said, I'd like to do Falmouth. They're like, come on down.
And if the Greater Boston Track Club runners are coming down, we'll bring them down a wheelchair.
Because he's a Greater Boston Track Club guy as well, Bob Hall was.
And what's remarkable, if you look at that picture, and in the early years of wheelchair racing, they were really wheelchairs.
Yeah, those hospital
They weren't
uprights.
racing chairs. You know, they were maybe the everyday wheelchair that they would use, you know, to go about their daily lives.
Can you imagine that?
And
over that course?
And not only does he, you know, do the Boston Marathon, then he comes down and does a 7-mile road race with lots of hills.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a remarkable accomplishment.
And he designed wheelchairs too, which was great. He was really good with that. Yep. In 1976, old Joan Benoit Simonson, this is the first of her 6 record wins. She was just amazing. I mean, most of her wins, she was just on her own, which she did.
Set course records almost each time.
And like the '84 Olympics, the inaugural women's marathon, she was on her own. So she was used to running on her own in a race. She
and I think her first year that she came down here, she might have only been a high school runner. And I think she and John Carroll, I think, go back to cross-country racing in high school, when John certainly knew about her as a cross-country runner from Maine in high school races.
So bringing her here, so now you have the notables, the men's open, women's open, wheelchair divisions. It's just growing, and it's only what, 4 years old, 5 years old, right? I mean, it's just amazing what this race was becoming. And in 1977, Perrier, which you see this banner, this is I think from a different year, 78 or 79. Perrier, their first sports sponsorship was the Falmouth Road Race. Most people think it's New York, which is a couple months after Falmouth, which they did. But Fred Lebo, the co-race director of the New York City Marathon, was talking to Tommy and said, you know, Perrier contacted us. They're thinking of getting into sports, which not a lot of companies were doing. I mean, even Tommy remembered that he would get like a little, he didn't want cigarette ads, things like that associated with this race. So he had the great story of he got his best suit on with the pizza pie stains on it, you know, with his one tie. He went to New York to meet with the president of Perrier, the North Division. Now he interviewed the president who was in the meeting. And Tommy was like flailing his arms, talking about Falmouth is great. This is, you know, 1977, a couple years old. The seaside, we had Bill Rogers, we had Joe Concannon with a newspaper taking an aerial photo. It's great with the hands and everything. Halfway through the meeting, the president said, "Oh, Tom, stop. You got us.
Here's the check.
Here's a check for several $1,000s. You got it." "Oh, really?" Tommy goes, "I'm sweating. It's like 100 degrees out. My forehead's red." And he got the first sponsorship. So the Falmouth Road Race was Perrier's first foray into sports, you know, which a lot of the companies started to do, but you get that banner, you know, and they use that banner a lot, but that was the one that Perrier really started to do this in '77.
And those pictures, you know, of the, you know, thousands of people literally at the start of the race, and when you've got the Frank Shorters and Bill Rogers and Joan Benoit in the field, those pictures go, you know, nationally, if not globally.
It's another Charlie Rogers photo too. Charlie Rogers had a front row seat. And you can see the guys in the car too, the car in the middle. You can see John Carroll in the yellow shirt, Rich Sherman. Tony Revis, who's one of the commentators, always joked that they'd have the touchdown start. The arms are up and they go, and that was it.
The old Porsche.
In the early days, you could still get your bib number out of the trunk of that on race day morning, which kind of changed a little bit after that. Now, 1978 was another big year. You had several years of all these great runners coming in. 1978 had, Bill Rogers had won it, but one of the big things was Alberto Salazar, who's in the white jersey, the third person up on the hill. He was a Greater Boston Track Club runner as well. with Bill Rogers and Bob Hodge, all those great runners and everything, and Greg Meyer and stuff, who you'll see here as well in the red jersey. In 1978, Al was younger than Bill, but he would always look at Bill Rogers to sort of emulate him. And Coach Squire at the Woods Hole started seeing people looking at Bill to see what's he doing. I want to do what he's doing. So unbeknownst to Bill Rogers, Coach told Bill, go behind the building, do your stretches, get your water, hydrate, do that way. Gun goes off, and Salazar was telling me this for the book. First mile, first water, Bill Rogers skipped it because he's all hydrated. So Salazar goes, well, Bill didn't take water, I'm not going to take water. Not knowing Rogers is fully hydrated.
Sure.
Did that for a number of races, very hot day. Dan Dillon, a Greater Boston guy, one of our great cross-country guys, can't remember half the race. It was just really gross and hot and disgusting, which some of these races are in August in the Cape. To the point that Salazar was on Rogers' shoulder around 4.5 miles trying to catch up to him. And he was telling me, Salazar was telling me, he goes, I was confused why I couldn't catch up. I go, what do you mean confused? He goes, I should be able to. We all train together. And we're pretty similar, but I couldn't get it. He goes, well, what I know now is I wasn't getting oxygen to my brain. I was like going heat stroke.
Right.
He goes, to this day, I can't remember the last couple of miles of the race. So at the top of this hill, you see the Brothers Four tower and everything. Around that, he was in 4th or 5th place. He came in 10th place. He lost
Staggering.
so much. In this photo, the first person is Bob Hodge, who you see, number 54. In the red jersey is Greg Meyer, who passed Salazar at the top of the hill, and then Salazar in the white jersey. Al had a tough time. At the finish line, he passed out. He just collapsed. Dr. Crago and the guys really were ahead of the schedule, ahead of the curve with road races in the summer, was using ice baths.
Ice baths.
A medical journal actually the year before was talking about the benefits of ice bath with heat stroke. Falmouth was way ahead of that. They threw Salazar in this ice bucket to bring his body temperature down. His temperature was 108 degrees. He was very combative, which is a sign of heat stroke. His father, Jose, grabbed a couple of tongue depressors, made him in the shape of a cross to sort of have Al focus on it. He got last rites. It was a bad scene. They couldn't rush him to the hospital because they had to bring his body temperature down to get stable. And they brought him to the hospital. Brian Salsberg, one of the Falmouth Five, one of the gentlemen, well, it's less than Falmouth Five now, the gentleman who was run every year was in the same room. Seeing Salazar get all the IVs. That he almost died, and he ended up coming back because he was a top 10, you get trophies several hours later. And Salazar came back with the gauze pad still on his arm to get his 10th place trophy, kind of like a badge of honor, like, just race didn't get me this time, watch out for me, and he came back.
Well, that,
strong.
you know, I mean, that's one of the famous stories of the history of the race, but it also speaks to how Falmouth, I think, was at the forefront of really, you know, medical supervision and looking out for the average runners.
Really, we're early.
As well as the world-class runners, and not at all, by any stretch of the imagination, was I in that realm, but 78 was the first year I ran Falmouth, after covering it from the newspaper's point of view, from the Cape Cod Times, and from 75. And I remember running it. I had watched it, covered it for the first few years, and thinking, boy, this looks like it would be fun to do. I wasn't much of an athlete, and I certainly wasn't a runner, but I felt like I wanted to be part of this whole atmosphere.
From the inside.
And in 78, the first year I ran it, when I thought I was in decent shape, I remember around 5 miles, my head starting to tingle. And I probably was on the verge of something like Salazar. I wasn't running anywhere near that kind of pace.
Well, these guys
but
are struggling.
for me, it felt like it.
Yeah, the top guys are struggling.
And you know,
What
I'll
chance
never
do anyone else
forget that. I remember the race, but I don't remember the last couple of miles because I was going through some tough times. But the medical team at Falmouth is exceptional.
They were so ahead of the curve on this.
They really are.
And the Hoyts, the team Hoyt, Rick and Dick Hoyt, marquee runners, you wanted to see them every year, which was great seeing them.
There were so many great inspirational stories, and they're at the top of the list.
Unbelievable seeing them. They started in 1979 for their stretch of races.
Remarkable. What
unbelievable. Now, 1980 was the first year international runners started coming, as you can see from this sign, welcoming people to Falmouth from different countries.
Well, that was the year, I think, of the Olympic boycott in Moscow in 1980, when many nations didn't compete in the Olympics. And so Rod Dixon from New Zealand and Greta Weitz from Norway, I think, they need a place to go because their countries also joined in the Olympic boycott, and they came to Falmouth
and they
because it was a world-class race.
They want to run against the best. So. Rod said, you want to run against the best, and I'm looking at Falmouth.
And Falmouth was the place to be. The Summer Olympics are going on. I need a summer race.
The Rogers, the Shorters, the Craig Virgins, all these guys, because you want to run. And Greta's the same way. You get Joan Boy Samuelson, because I want to run against the best.
Right.
Which you do in the Olympics.
And they were in Falmouth.
Right, so they're in Falmouth, so that's what you do in 1980. Yep. Now again, the race is only however many years old from 1980. In 1981, Runner's World named them the best road race in the country. The Nurmi Award, the Pavel Nurmi Award, named after the great Olympian.
And by now, up to 1980-81, the sport had really exploded. There were road races every weekend, and mega road races with thousands of runners. By 1980, Falmouth probably had 6,000 or 7,000 runners in the race, maybe a little bit less.
It's only 9 years old.
But by then, then 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people at one place to run a local road race. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And Falmouth was in competition with the Boston Marathon and road races and
the
significant
Boulder, San Francisco,
and Runner's World, which is probably the most prestigious running magazine out there, recognizes Falmouth.
Can you imagine that?
And gives it the Nurmi Award after Paavo Nurmi.
Beautiful trophy. We still have that here, which is a great trophy. Now, with all this attention, I'm going to lead you into a terrific story. With all this attention of all these elite athletes, international athletes now, the media coverage. As you can see from this great photo of the fine built flatbed media truck of the early 70s and 80s, on which you are somewhere.
I am somewhere in there. I might have hair in that picture, unlike now, but I'm not sure where. But you can imagine a rudimentary press truck, and talk about a cattle call. That how they were able to construct that. But again, it speaks to how Falmouth recognized the importance of the race, and the media recognized the quality of the race, and they all wanted to be here.
That's true.
There's national reporters and photographers on that truck chronicling what went on.
Right, they've earned it. They've earned it. And what happened one year, Mr. Higgins?
In the early 90s, we're on a flatbed, and it may have been that original one, and one of these back tires sheared off. We went around the corner. There would be a lot of creaking and squeaking because there were too many people, and many of us may be too heavy, and there was creaking, squeaking, and snap, and a tire sheared off and went bouncing down the road.
The whole wheel and tire?
The whole wheel. We were going 15, 20 miles an hour in front of the lead pack of runners. It sheared off and started literally bouncing down the road, and one of the lead Kenyan runners at the time, Steve Kogo, had to dodge the bouncing tire. It flew by him, he avoided the tire, and he went on to win the race. And we made it to the finish line in one piece.
Yeah, almost in one piece, the vehicle. Old Johnny Kelly here.
The great Johnny Kelly.
Everyone loved seeing him. Fun story Dave Duba was saying from the first year, 1973. He remembers when he finished and he won it. After a little while, he was in the Brothers 4, and he sees this gray-haired gentleman in a Hawaiian shirt doing the jitterbug and dance floor. He looks over, and it's Johnny Kelly. And Dave goes, "Guy's like double my age. I can't do what he's doing."
Exactly.
And Johnny just had that energy. It was amazing what he had that energy to do.
He was part of the whole fabric of the local running community, too.
Everyone loved that.
Helped form. He's wearing the Cape Cod Athletic Club T-shirt, singlet, and he lived in East Dennis at the time. It was part of the local, so you could go to a local road race on any weekend and run into a marathon legend.
It was great seeing him there. Another highlight is this flag, 1987. Mount Rushmore Monument had a huge flag over Mount Rushmore.
For the bicentennial, I believe.
In 1987, they toured the country, and if you wanted the flag at your event, you could apply for it and ask for it. And Jim Garris, a Vietnam veteran on Falmouth, asked them to, and they brought this huge flatbed. It's 300 pounds, 4,000 square foot flag. This is the original Mount Rushmore flag. For a number of years, they did that Mount Rushmore. Right. They stopped doing the original Mount Rushmore flag tour throughout the country, but Falmouth has kept that tradition with a flag.
And it's
at
really
the finish line.
a great signature
Oh,
of the race. You come
beautiful to
around
see.
the final hill and down the hill,
Yes.
and the flag is flapping in the breeze, and
welcomes
it's
you
just
to Falmouth Heights.
at a beachside, scene. It's just a wonderful
Oh, I love seeing
signature
that.
scene
I love seeing that.
at the race.
And also in the 90s was the beginning of the Kenyans and the African countries dominating this race, as they did with marathons and other races throughout the country. The woman on the left, Lorna Kiplagat, still owns the course record. Woman on the right, Catherine Dereba, has won Boston a number of times. She's
She
an
won
Olympian.
Falmouth 4 or
She's won
5 times,
Falmouth
I
a number
think.
of times. I remember her telling me a story. Another great aspect of the Falmouth Road Race is the host families who host these great elite athletes. And her host family for years would take her blueberry picking, because back in Kenya she would go coffee picking for coffee beans, so she loved the blueberry picking. In Falmouth, they would make food from Kenyan stuff, and a lot of the host families do that.
The host family program is really a great part of the whole fabric of the race also.
Yeah, 91 was big. That was the first year of the Kenyans. It was also the first year of the Falmouth Walk, that these two gentlemen, Tommy Leonard again on the left and Eddie Doyle in the middle, this was taken when they dedicated the Tommy Leonard start line in 2013.
At the Captain Kidd.
The Captain Kidd. They started the Falmouth Walk, which is the day before.
Right.
Started in 1991, which just like the road race started small, now they have two distances.
And Falmouth has really evolved now into a road race weekend.
Yes,
Saturday you have the walk in the morning. There's a track festival and a Falmouth Mile in the afternoon at the high school, and where the expo is. And then, of course, capped off on Sunday of race day. But it's really evolved into a whole weekend of festivities.
That's something that John and Lucia, Rich and Kathy, Bill Doherty, Bill Crowley, Bill Sweeney, Captain Bill Sweeney from the Casino by the Sea, had people
Another great landmark
on the rooftop of his casino at Falmouth Heights, started, and it continued with Matt Alger. It continued with Dave McGilvery's first year as the race director. All those things continue, which I thought was great in 91. The 90s were just some fantastic competitions.
It's really a big community event. It's a world-class race, but it's a small-town community event.
It really has that feel, both. It really does.
It blends both together really well.
Well, you have a bike valet for all the amateurs and stuff, and portable lockers. You have all the visas and all the travel stuff for the elites, and everything in between. It's amazing how it encompasses.
Many people, like you said, stay with host families.
They
buy
stay in
hotels, but
I know some people bought houses here over years. And to see the broad reach of this race, one of the first virtual races before it was needed with COVID, was this woman, Sunita Williams. This is actually taking about 250 miles up.
At the space station.
At the International Space Station. She ran the Falmouth Road Race in 2012.
A NASA astronaut.
A NASA astronaut. She also ran Boston up in space. She's tethered to a treadmill. She was in charge, and she led the physical fitness aspect in addition to other
And her family, I believe, is from Falmouth
and
Needham
area. So a lot of good connections here. So with no gravity, obviously 250 miles up.
Running on air.
Running on air. The bone density and muscle mass, she helps with the astronauts and herself to design programs. And one of them was, as you can see, she's tethered to a treadmill here. And she had run Boston. They sent her somehow electronically the bib number. Same thing with Falmouth. Now, when she did Falmouth, she was telling me they piped in the sound from the start. So she could hear the gun and hear the people talking and the announcements at the start, and people at the start could hear her.
And didn't they have a video screen at the finish line? And you could see her actually.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
The technology.
She has since run it here, and she comes to Falmouth a lot on terra firma. But I asked her about the pros and cons, and she said one of the best things is you can actually put a bottle of water in front of me while I'm running, and it just stays, it floats, which I thought would be, I'd love to have that.
That sounds
running
pretty good.
A marathon. Yeah. She goes, however, when you sweat, the little droplets of sweat also float. She goes, so it's a give and take what you want to do. But this is amazing that she designed this kind of a program that she would have up there. And this is 2012. So 2000 is also another thing that Falmouth does, Boston Marathon does, Bix, as we were mentioning, Iowa does, not a lot, more races should do, is honor their champions. Falmouth has done that year after year at the Expo. Here's some of the wheelchairs. On the far left is Tatiana McFadden, who's won this several times. Krieg Shabbat right there next to her. the gentleman in the microphone is Craig Blanchett, who has the most wins. The one on the far right in the first row is Candace Cable, one of the early pioneers, excellent. The top row on the far left is Dan Romanowski, Romanchuk, sorry, who has run it more recently and has won this. So you have some great wheelchair champions. You can even see some of the details of the wheelchairs, the design. They also highlight, as we often mention, the Mount Rushmore of the men's and women's. From left to right, you have Joan Benoit Samuelson, 1984 inaugural Olympic winner, number of times at Boston.
First Lady of Falmouth.
First Lady of Falmouth 6 times. Bill Rogers next to her, 4 Bostons, 4 New Yorks, Olympian, Falmouth wins. His nemesis, just kidding, friend Frank Shorter next to him, Olympian, gold medal, silver medalist. And next to Frank is Ben Flanagan, who's won this twice, including 2020.
And Tony Revis, I see.
2021, I'm sorry. And the far right was the MC is Tony Revis, who shared the press truck with you.
That's right.
And remembers that wheel bouncing down and landing on someone's front yard. But they do that. They're very personable, very accessible. We'll talk to you about training. We'll talk to you about your races. How did you do it?
That's the great thing, I think, too, Paul, about the sport is that you and I can, we can't play on Fenway Park with the Red Sox. We can't play with the Celtics at the Garden. But we can be in a road race with Olympians and legends. Now, we can't run with them, but we can be part of the event with them. And I think that's what kind of appeals to road racing and has helped, this whole growth and sustaining the sport is that, and they'll mix with you. You can hang around at the finish line. You can hang around at the ball field.
Buy Rod Dixon a beer?
Well,
at the
perhaps. So,
New Zealand Olympian?
And they're just very accessible and very accommodating.
And even they know that too. I remember Craig Virgin telling me one of the first years he ran Falmouth, he ended up winning it, but one of the first years he ran was one of the years Bill Rogers won. And Craig said, I finished. Now, Craig's one of our greatest Olympic athletes. Craig said, I finished, crossed the finish line, I look to my left, and I see this big, long line, like 200 people. Just a line near the field. And at the beginning of the line was Bill Rogers sitting on a chair in the basketball court, signing autographs, talking. Here's a track guy, track and field runner, marathoner, with this kind of attention, and he's talking to each one. Took a long time to get through the line, but he's spending time with each one. And Craig said to me, he goes, if I ever get to be in a big level, I want to be like that. Yeah. I want to remember that. And he did. He remembered things like that, and Bill still does that. Bill
they're great ambassadors for the
sport. And so even within themselves, they notice that, which I think is great. Us amateur ones notice that too. But that's something that's fostered here at Falmouth, at Boston, things like that. That you can actually just talk, and they are the greats. I mean, they are the Olympians. They are the pioneers. They were alive when these people. Because you think about it, with the running boom in '72. That basically started with Mr. Shorter there. We're around with these people. That's
and they're
why,
still relevant. They're still around.
And that's why the 50s and the 60s age groups are so good, is that these people who were in their 20s, their teens or 20s at the beginning of the running boom, if they stayed with it, are in their 50s and 60s. And that's why those age groups are tough, because
it's a lifetime sport. And you'll talk to Frank, now lives in Falmouth, and occasionally I'll see him, and he says, I'm just a citizen runner now. I can go out and jog. I can't jog with him today either at the pace that he would run or the pace I would run, but he'll just go out and he'll jog the Falmouth Road Race course, at a pace that a lot of other people. And you'll look to your left or right, and it'll be Frank Shorter.
Yeah, and they'll appreciate that. I remember Kofleski, after he won Boston, but after he would run a Boston or Falmouth, he went back to the finish line and cheered on us slowpokes. Yeah. Here is one of the greatest marathoners ever, Olympians.
It's what makes the sport special.
It's what makes the sport so special, is that they would do that. For sure. Now, in 2020, with COVID, like with most races, well, all races globally, it was canceled. There was no in-person on-the-course race. I took this photo on race day in 2020. This is what the Falmouth Road Race finish line looked like
On race day.
On race day in 2020, when everyone did it at home virtually. There were a few people, one of whom is you.
Well, you know, that's another thing about Falmouth is they didn't really cancel the race. A lot of races just kind of shut down, and rightly so because of COVID and the pandemic. But Falmouth was very creative in saying, you know what, we've got a tradition, we've got a history. How can we maintain that somehow? And do it safely, obviously, without jeopardizing anyone. And they came up with this creative idea of doing it home. Run 7 miles in your neighborhood. Ride your bike 7 miles. Go for a walk for 7 miles. And we'll do it over a 2-week stretch.
Yeah, send photos.
No rules. You know, your game, your rules, as Dave McGilvery, the race director, says. And they found a way to maintain the participation, and they got 8,000 to 10,000 people to do it. And on race day in 2020, I feel so connected to this race professionally and personally that I had to come to Falmouth on race day. I didn't run it, but I came to Falmouth, I walked the course and jogged a little bit of the course, and I just had to be in Falmouth, and I had to be at Falmouth Ice on race day of the pandemic 2020
I think some locals did. I went there. I'm local enough that I had to see it. I've been coming to Falmouth since I was a kid.
There's a connection we have
my
to the race.
My godparents lived here. I've been coming here since I was a kid. I live about an hour or so outside of Falmouth, but I had to come. It was rainy. Probably would have liked to run in a nice, I wouldn't say cool, but you're not.
I think a few people, they discouraged people, I think, from doing it because they didn't want a lot of people, as I said, who were emotionally connected. So they really encouraged you to stay home and do it in your neighborhood.
Right,
most of us did. But I think that day, there were a few people that maybe snuck into Falmouth
and did it. Right, there was some. Brian Baker and his family, very staunch Falmouth supporters. When I was there, I saw Brett Hawkins, his wife Mary, Bob Hodge, Brett Hawk, everyone knows him as Hawk, with the announcing with a lot of the races and stuff. So there were some locals who did want to just be.
There's this pull that you feel like you need to be here.
They just went there. So, but it was nice. It stayed connected. You know, it continued the tradition for a lot of people to, you know, especially the ones who came here to do that. So, but it was interesting that it rained. Yeah. You know, I thought that
like the first year.
Like the first year. I thought that was kind of apropos that it kind of did that. But 2021, it semi came back to normal, like with most races. Again, Falmouth was the same as a lot of other things, with precautions, wearing your mask, a lot of medical things, reduced field, things like that. Again, a lot of races did. Boston Marathon. This is a photo from 2021 where the expo was outside. There was no expo inside. You could just get your number, but you had to funnel through. It was organized quite well.
Everyone masking, I think.
Yeah, even outside had the mask, which is fine. So the expo, there was a pared down expo outside the high school, as you see. And this is the line of the runners to go in to get the number. You had to go in and then kind of go all the way through to get the number on the far end of the gym, and that was it. That was inside. Just like Channel. Then you went out the other side. And that was it for there. It was good. I didn't hear any complaints. I was in the expo here with my book, and I didn't hear any complaints because everyone was just happy to be out. Happy to be running, just happy to be there.
Happy to be back.
Yeah, just happy to be there. So when you saw something like that, I mean, it's just great to see the turnout. Also, what returned, you alluded to this a little bit, part of the weekend of Falmouth is the activities at the high school track. So that returned. And what was really neat here, this is 2021 outside during the track. On the far right, you have Mark Davis, a U.S. Olympian, Olympian, interviewing Molly Seidel, Olympic medalist, on the track. And on the staging there, you can see Jennifer Edwards on the right from Falmouth Road Race, executive director. And next to her is Tony Revis, who was getting ready to MC some of these events. And standing on the left, Tony's wife, Toya, on the far left. She's a great coach out west. And Bill Rogers in the white shirt with his mask underneath his chin to show that you brought the mask with you. But it was a sense of normalcy to be on the track.
And this is part of the festival that
yes,
the road race
kids
weekend
races,
has become.
The miles, the high school miles, the elite miles,
Right.
just the festivity, just to be out there. I mean, you have some great names in the mile.
Sure.
Over the years, like Susie Favor had won.
Olympians.
Olympians, world records. The mile race itself and the Carcary mile for,
And
for
they'll,
the kids.
you know, the men will run sub 4-minute miles.
Yes, it's
here,
really exciting.
easily,
So it's good to see this out here. That was really nice to see. That return, which it has continued to do that. And interestingly, you'll see how it's sort of developed over the years. There's a great aerial shot from the Historical Society. I remember John Carroll and Rich joking with me about the race, because they're like one of the only races, the only road race I can think of, they were saying they had to get permits from the Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
Because what happened is you get these clusters of boats at Woods Hole, and they would follow the race to here at Falmouth Heights. And as you can see, you can start swimming here. So it can get dangerous, so they had to clear some space here. And you'll see the finish line. The finish line is a yellow line sort of in the middle of the photo. That's the finish line, and to the right is the field. So the first 2 years when it's finished at the Brothers 4, people would spill onto the field. So they moved the finish line down for the third in subsequent years. Down to where it is now. So this is a good look of how you see the runners approaching from the top right corner, hooking all the way around Grand to get
This
to.
is such a great image that really, I think, speaks to what Falmouth is. You know, it's Cape Cod in the summertime. There were people on the beach, maybe aren't there for the road race, but they're there for the beach. Certainly the road race is a big part of the day. You know, it's just really an iconic shot that
I love this
and
shot.
I used to always, I've said often that you could take Falmouth, its infrastructure, its organizational expertise, and plop it into wherever, but it wouldn't be Falmouth, because you've got this certain blend of Cape Cod in the summertime, world-class competition, outstanding organizational, you know, people involved with the race. And just this, as we started talking about, this whole confluence of events that just kind of, you know, coalesce into the Falmouth Road Race.
And you couldn't plan it. Even in hindsight, looking back, you couldn't have said, if we knew ahead of time, let's do this, you couldn't have.
It wouldn't work.
You couldn't have said, let's have Frank win. Let's have this happen. You couldn't. I mean, to the point that in 1980, the race had to take a breath and go, whoa, we're getting reactionary. Like everyone in the whole country, each year they were reacting to the previous year's race, going, whoa, we have to settle down. Let's have a limit, let's have a lottery. 1980, they limited the amount of runners. Courtney Bird, with his pet goose, famously did the random lottery by putting applications in bags, and whichever one the goose went to, and his wife, who worked for the paper, took a picture of it for the front page. People still, you know, say, "Oh, I wish I could have made it." I was telling Courtney, I go, "How more random can you get? It's a duck or a goose." He goes, "Lucy the goose is the name that did that."
And it really, you know, I see people every August in Falmouth that maybe I won't see until the following, you know, Sunday in August. It's a class reunion kind of atmosphere where you just kind of go back. But when I see people, it's like you pick right up from where you left off a year before, and there's just so many great relationships and friendships born out of Falmouth.
Oh, they last. That's one of the greatest things. And we'll end with this photo of the Falmouth Road Race. I want to thank you again, Mr. Higgins. This is we could have made this a mini series. Of this race, so I want to thank you again for sharing all these stories and everything.
Great fun. Thank you.
I'm Paul Clerici. This is Bill Higgins, and I want to thank you again for joining us.